Axons Unleashed.
G'day ladies and gents, Robbie Turner's my name. Welcome to another cracking episode of Axons Unleashed. Well, I know it's going to be a cracking episode. You don't know yet because you don't know what's in my head and you don't know the fucking weapon of a bloke I've got sitting here next to me as well as you, Luke.
Thank you, RT.
Ladies and gents, let me just give you a quick little background because this is something out of the ordinary. This is not a veteran. This is not a veteran story, but it's something very, very important to your journey with us when it comes to investment properties, and it's all about depreciation. It's all about tax. It's making sure that those two forms of guaranteed income with an investment property is your rent return and tax return, about how that all happens. So we've got Tyron Hyde from Washington Brown come and join us. And let me just give you a bit of a background story about how I met this bloody awesome human. As full disclosure, Ty's just given a quick little masterclass to our team here in the office, Luke.
Yeah.
And I think I've just met someone who's got more energy than me.
Mate, the least boring depreciation expert in Australia, I think it was.
That's me.
So, ladies and gents, if you've been following us a little while, when I got out of the military, as you know, I work with another property firm. Very, very thankfully, and I do praise this guy on a regular basis, although I'm sure he's not listening to me anymore. He used to take me down to the business coaching firm that we were all part of. And I was sort of down there as his right-hand man, which was good, you know. Here we could go down there and learn all these advanced techniques about cash flow, finance, marketing, sales, HR, or like whatever business function it's going to be. And as the business owner, he wasn't burdened with taking it on all himself and then going back and passing it on to the team. He had a sort of oppo there, you know, sitting there with him so we could shoot the shit. So yeah, mate, that's really tight. That's where I first met you, down there at the Business Blueprint Group with Dale Beaumont. Yep. What are we talking? Probably 8 or 9 years ago. So
wasn't it overseas? I'm going to meet you.
We certainly spent some time over in Philippines together. I think that's where we got on the piss the first time and really solidified our relationship. They don't call it a social lubricant for no reason. But Ty, welcome to Axons Unleashed, brother. I'm really looking forward to going through things.
Appreciate the time.
Yeah, so Washington Brown, mate. So we'll get into the sort of little bit that shortly. But one of the things I loved about your first sort of coming into the office here, you've been watching us and you're just like, oh, I've seen you before. So you've been watching the Axon team grow.
Yeah,
tell us about that.
Well, you're obviously in my feed a lot with this stuff, which is great. You're doing that well. But I guess it kind of felt homely when I walked in here. I already knew all your faces already, which is good.
Yeah, that's top fantastic stuff, mate. As I do with every one of our clients, take us back to the start. Like, who are you? Where did you grow up? How did you get into quantity surveying and all that sort of stuff? Because it's a really interesting story. And interestingly enough, ladies and gents, it does have a military spin on it. So take care of that.
Mm-hmm. So I grew up in a place called Concord in Sydney. Back then it was a working class suburb. It probably took you an hour to get from Concord to Sydney. Now it's like a 20-minute drive. My father was in the... Well, I'll start with the quantity surveying first. So I wanted to be an architect, but I didn't get the marks. And so... But I loved maths and I loved buildings. And someone suggested a construction economics degree. And so I enrolled in that and I loved it because I always loved property. As I said before, I was the type of guy that, you know, I couldn't walk past the street and not stop at a building site and stick my head in, much to my wife's chagrin. And so it was a good fit. Maths and property is what I love. So I did 2 years of construction economics, and that was in 89, 90, and then I deferred for 3 years and did what all good young men and women should do, and I backpacked for 3 years.
How was that? You enjoyed it? Where'd you go specifically?
I was based in London,
right?
But I was working, you know, low-paid jobs because I was unskilled. I was unskilled labour.
Yep.
And I remember on my last job, I was getting £2.50 an hour. And I worked out that by the time I got a tube, got a packet of cigarettes, because I stupidly smoked back then, can of Coke, it cost me more to go to work than I was making.
Counterintuitive.
And I went, this is not right. So I came back, and so the number one thing I learned from backpacking was I didn't want to work for unskilled, for minimum wage again.
I've got a good question.
Yeah.
You're a good-looking bloody Aussie bloke. What was that like being over in London?
It was fun.
Shout out to your wife, by the way.
Yeah. We were separated at that time. And so I came back and I re-enrolled at uni, but at that time, in my final year at uni, I was 23 and I thought to myself, I'm so old, right? Now I look at a 23-year-old, I think you're a baby.
Yeah.
But at that time I thought, I haven't got any career. I'm doing a degree, but I haven't actually started in the property industry. So, but then I saw an ad at University of Technology saying cadet wanted. I went and I stole all the ads at the cadet on the UTS. I was the only one that turned up for the job, and there was only one man there, Tony Brown, who was the Brown in Washington Brown. And I said to him, "Look, I haven't got a started the career. I'll work for you for a year for free, on the hope that you'll then employ me." And so I was working at night and weekends and writing my thesis on depreciation at the time. So I was very, very busy at that year. Looking back, I don't know how I did it because I was packing more into my day back then than I was now. And so I ended up graduating, and as I said, I mentioned I wrote a thesis on depreciation, and then the laws changed, and they said, well, actually it was in 1997, and they said, well, now quantity surveyors are identified as the appropriate body to estimate costs where the costs are unknown. And I'd just written a thesis. I was a quantity surveyor, and I wrote a thesis on depreciation. I went, hello.
Serendipitous, mate.
I was pretty lucky, but you make your own luck a bit as well, right?
Of course.
Hey, just talk to me about the term depreciation, because the majority of our listeners will know, for instance, the most simplest example would be you buy a laptop for work and you're at home and you're working away doing work stuff on your laptop, you're able to depreciate that item, write off that item from a tax point of view. But you've now taken it for a whole nother level where you're talking about the depreciation costs of building superstructure and also the items inside that.
That's right. So that's what we do. So we separate the construction costs into relevant components that you can claim as a property investor. Should I be looking here? Or here?
Either
so you can claim because certain types within a building, with your laptop example, you base the depreciation on what you pay for the laptop. That's all you need to know. Your receipt from JB Hi-Fi, right? But you don't go to ASUS or you don't go to Dell and say, hey Dell, what did it actually cost you to build the computer to base the depreciation on? And that's where we come in. So when you buy a house for $700,000, you don't claim the whole $700,000. You've got to claim the $350,000 build cost, and then even one step further, separate that $350,000 into different varying components that depreciate it separate at different rates. Because bricks are going to last longer than carpet. So the government recognises that bricks last longer, so therefore you claim them over a longer period at a slower rate. Than something that wears and tears faster, like carpet, because you're walking on carpet. Right, that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah, of course, mate.
Look, so I mean, from we do give our clients an insight into this from a process guide point of view. And you've been a very active property investor over the years. Is it insightful for you to see how it all gets broken down?
Incredibly. Like we just did a masterclass in the office before, as you said, and like my eyes were wide open to the information you're sharing. There were so many little nuggets of gold that we'll get to for our audience today. But just so many little nuggets of gold. Even being inside the industry and sort of being an avid property investor myself. Just little things that I didn't know about transitioning ownership, about transitioning, even if you own the property yourself, was just really insightful for us to be able to bring our best, bring that contemporary knowledge to our clients. So, mate, thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
And just with depreciation, the figures that we claim, or that you as an investor will claim, they're within the property when you buy it, right? Whether you claim it or not is up to you.
Of course.
But you need someone to extract that number and tell you what to do with it, right? We could buy exact same property. If you don't claim the depreciation, it's just going to cost you $200 extra a week more to do it. The rent doesn't affect what you do. The mortgage is all separate. There's one item, it's called a non-cash deduction because you're not paying for it. Every other item that you claim as a tax deduction, you have to pay for. Right? Whether it be your levies, whether it be your rates, whether it be your property management fees. The only item that you can claim that you don't have to pay for is depreciation, because you've already paid for it because it's within the property.
The term I use, ladies and gents, those that have seen our process brief, is that all those other items, money has to leave your bank account, but no money leaves your bank account for this on-paper deduction.
That's right. And except my fee.
And it becomes...
Which is tax deductible.
Washington Brown plug. It becomes so important for our clients, particularly, obviously we focus on brand new land and builds. And so a part of that holding strategy that we put in place for our clients is, that rent and that tax return making up a significant portion of that holding strategy to allow those properties to go up over time. But of course they need an expert to come in and make that assessment against their property so they can maximise their gains, particularly in the first 4 to 5 years.
That's right.
How long does, so you get your property depreciation report done by a registered quantity surveyor. How many, talk to us about the staff at Washington Brown. How many in total, and then break it up into sort of technical and admin? Give us an insight into the business.
Okay, so there's probably about 40 40. It depends. Well, it depends what you define as employee. The state government, when I'm with payroll tax, they seem to define anyone that I've ever met as an employee. As an employee.
Here's the thing. Like you can say, it's only the three of us here. No one else will
Right.
know
No
what
one's
you're
listening,
saying.
mate.
I got audited about 10 years ago from payroll tax, and it seemed that anyone I'd ever met seemed to work for me, and I had to pay back pay. But anyway, so we've got about 40 staff. We have some overseas doing some processing. We have quantity surveyors themselves, probably about 10. We've got 5 in sales. Then you've got accounts, and you've got marketing, and you've got tech. We outsource our IT. So, but then there's some people there that purely work for us as IT, but they're saying they work for another company, I'd say about 40 people.
Tell us about what's the character and the makeup of a quantity surveyor? Like, if my observation or opinion of them, they'd be very, almost like a very tech-minded and a bit geeky. Have I got that right or not really?
I'm probably not your typical quantity surveyor.
I realise that. I wasn't talking about you. I'm talking about the other 10. The people that are actually doing the work.
Ouch. I'd say definitely they'd generally be more of a mathematical kind of minded person. Yep. Depends which field. See, it's like quantity surveying. It's like legal or accounting. There's so many variations of what a quantity surveyor can do. Right, so in our field, yes, you'd be more technical, mathematical based, but like a bit of property. But then you've got like expert witness quantity surveyors. You've got quantity surveyors. So when I first started with Washington Brown, this depreciation side was just growing a little bit, but 95% of my role was going out to development sites. And if you want to borrow $100 million from a bank, the bank just doesn't give you $100 million. They'll say, okay. What is actually, we want an independent party to estimate those construction costs, which we would give the report to the bank, and we'd work for the bank. The bank would engage us, and I would be the project auditor on thousands of projects in Sydney. We would go out every month and do progress claims, say, the cost of that $100 million, you've poured the footings, you've excavated the site, therefore you're at 10% of the project completion. The bank will then release 10% of that $100 million to the developer. The developer would then pay the builder, then hopefully pay the subcontractors.
A little bit like the stage payments for a house being built.
Yeah, but a big scale stuff.
Of course.
Can I just jump back to you for a second, mate? Like, obviously, you're running a pretty bloody successful business and that sort of stuff. And we were just talking about your journey out of university and into Washington Brown. Did you always have that seed of entrepreneurship in you, or was it something that grew in you over time?
I think I always had it.
Yeah.
I think I always... to be honest, someone asked me the other day, what was it, luck or hard work that made you successful? And I said a bit of both, right? But I think I would have been... I've always had that entrepreneurial thing of going to be successful. I was a door-to-door salesman when I was younger, and I was in telesales. I learned my craft by doing telesales. I did not have a problem picking up a phone, and I think telesales for someone young is a great skill to have. Yep. It's relating with people, getting knockbacks, and that's where I started in telesales. That's what helped me go through uni, and that's what I was doing in London. I was doing telesales over there, and it came good stead. So when I came back, what happened was the depreciation wasn't known, and I was like, there was only me and one other firm were doing depreciation schedules at the time. Yep. And so developers didn't know what it was. So I would ring up every developer and I'd say, hey, there's this new tax law that says I'll give you a free report, and if you then sell one of your units to an investor, just send them to me and I'll give them a report, right? Yep. So I'd just door knock to develop. I'd drive up to building sites and speak to the developer and say, hey, here's this thing. Let me do this for free for you. Yep. And hopefully I'll get some money. They didn't. I was trying to help them sell their units, and I would get like $300 at the end. Here's a fun fact though. 25 years ago, when probably maybe more, 30 years ago, how am I, 52? And so, no, about 28 years ago, when I first did my depreciation schedules, I was charging, this was before GST, I was charging $1,500 for a report.
Wow.
Today I'm lucky to get $600, $700, right? Yeah. That's half. What other industries
have gone back
right? So the problem is now we talk about volume.
That? Is it volume?
Yeah. Volume, and like back then when I started, there was no email. Wasn't even. I had to post out my quotes.
Yep.
Right? And so and wait and hope that someone and by the time the printer actually printed, you know, and then you'd make a mistake. Oh no.
The house is already 2 years depreciated by the time it gets out of the back of the printer.
No, do you remember when you used to send an email and the bar would come across your screen?
Yeah.
And it gets 3/4 of the way and it's stop. Oh no. Shut my age. Yeah, so.
But, you said that you talked to us about the whole Washington Brown gig. I asked you before about where the Washington bit come from, and they're like just your relationship with Mr. Brown back in the day, and how you did from a mechanical point of view end up buying him out and taking over the firm as that entrepreneur.
So Tony Brown, it was the Brown in Washington Brown. He started the firm, and that was more the traditional side. And I learnt so much from him. He was a mentor. So we would have a smallish office, but we'd have some of the biggest clients in Australia, right? And because we were managing the projects, we'd have all these developers, and I was like a little puppy listening because I was still more of a cadetish type thing then. And I would just sit there and listen to them argue or go through building contracts, big building contracts, and just the knowledge that I learned by listening to these big developers really was quite mind-blowing in hindsight. Like you wouldn't get that. Like in this Zoom world that we were living in during COVID, the amount of mentoring that I got by going into the office and sitting and listening to all these big developers was a craft that or a skill set that I don't think I would have got if I was living in Zoom world today.
Of course.
So Washington Brown. So I then started a company called Property Depreciation when I was there. Because when the laws changed and this is a good little gig, I might go and set up my own business. So I went out. I left Washington Brown, started a company called Property Depreciation Pty Limited, which I still have, and it started going quite well. And then Tony said, well, look, why don't you come back as a 50-50 partner and we can build this together. He's got the clients, I've got the knowledge, because he didn't know anything about depreciation, right? So we came back and I was only 24 then or something, came back and went and we grew it together.
Yeah, basically. Wow, that's great foresight from him as well.
It annoyed him at first, obviously, when I left, right? But when I came, I was like his son in some ways, and so it kind of gutted him. I think he really had a heart.
Just in case you're wondering, those people who have left Axon recently, you're not fucking coming back. Not a fucking chance. I know you're all wondering. No is the answer.
Well, for me, I look at that example, and we've got a couple of books and a lot of material that we read and share around the office and sort of talk to each other about. And one of those is the infinite game. And for us, it's about playing that long game and understanding that sometimes there's business world can be bumpy and that sort of stuff, but it's not about what happens in the here and now. It's about what's happening for us to be able to operate at an infinite level, with the business success at mind.
Yep.
Got a quick. What was it like when you went out by yourself and you started and you were being a business owner for the first time? Can you remember what were some of those key lessons that you went through which still benefit you today?
Knockbacks.
Right.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Right.
People saying no.
Saying no.
Yeah.
That's again with telesales. It was hard. I was working out, my mother had a sunroom out the front, and that's where I was just doing the tele. Like, she was pretty proud, but there wasn't a lot of money coming in at the time. And I'm not. My father lost all his money, so there wasn't a lot of money going around in our world. So it was, and my father wasn't an entrepreneur at all. He was more. Well, I'll tell you a bit of story about my father.
Please do.
So my father was probably one of the smartest men I've ever met in my life. Where they grew up? We grew up around Condobolin, but he ended up in the military. He was in the Air Force for 12 years. Yep. Served in Singapore for 2 years. Had a son over there that died. That like 4-month-old died, and my mother was imagine the 50s in Singapore. It was a very different Singapore back then. And my mother told a story of her running through the streets with the baby, trying to get some help.
Medical assistance,
Anyway, he's still... So my brother, he'd be... So I'm 50, he'd probably be 70. It's weird saying you got a brother 70.
Yeah, wow.
Because I've got a big family, 5 siblings, plus him. But he died there, and he's buried it in a place called Kranji in Singapore. And I went and saw him recently. I went and found it. When I was at a business blueprint conference, and I went, what? I'm going to try and find my brother. So I went out there, and this Kranji cemetery is massive, right? And I just walked up for 2 days. Walked up there, went there. I couldn't find him. And then I came back.
Not in alphabetical order?
No. I tell you, the sad thing was, the average age would have been 19.
Yeah.
And I came back and I went, I'm not going on this mission. I've got to find him. So I contacted the British consulate in England, and they sent me a bloody map with a big bloody cross with a red dot saying that's where he was. So we went. Then I went went back with my wife and my daughter, and we went to find George. His name was George, on a mission to find George. And we found him, and the reason I couldn't find him because the engraving was all dirty and hadn't, and so I had to screw it, and then I found him. But,
that's awesome.
But back to my father. So he was the smartest man I've ever met, I reckon. He had 4 degrees. So when he left the military, he had 4 degrees. He got 4 degrees. He was a lecturer at TAFE, and then he had a stroke. And he was paralysed on the left-hand side, and he couldn't walk, couldn't use his left leg, arm. And if you're wondering what it's like to have a stroke, after this podcast, try and tie your shoelaces up with one right hand, or try and put your belt on with one right hand, right? It was tough seeing him go through that. So most of my life, I remember my father being a cripple. Yeah. He was like, he had a stroke when I was 13. He died when I was about 30. And so they retired him early. The reason I'm telling you this story, and maybe something for your listeners to think about, even though he's the smartest man that I've ever met, he retired him early, and he had a payout from TAFE as a senior lecturer there. It was quite a lot of money. It was $250,000.
Yep. And
he put it into a company called Estate Mortgage, which in the late 80s went broke. They were lending. They said they were as safe as houses. They had. I remember the ads saying they'll get an extra 2% extra on rather than what the big banks were paying. But what they didn't say, they were saying yes, we're investing it in residential properties, but they're investing into development sites.
Yeah.
Right. And so when the interest rates went to 17%, it just fell down like a house of cards.
Yep.
And I remember towards the end of his life, he getting these letters from Burns Philp, the administrators, saying, you're going to get 2 cents back in the dollar and all that stuff. And I was just seeing him, just was crippling him, right? Yeah. And so whilst the reason I'm telling you this story, whilst the smartest man in the room, he wasn't that financially literate.
Yep.
And he didn't have the backing. He wasn't during his life putting money into property or anything like that. He waited till the end, so don't do that, and put it all into the one company.
Yep.
So I guess the financial literacy of someone back then, whilst he's the smartest person, had degrees in philosophy and but didn't really have much financial nous and wasn't setting himself up early on.
I think, mate, that's going to resonate really strongly with our audience. Like a lot of people in the military are absolute masters of their craft. They go through years and years of training and years of using that skill set, and they're educated. They've got worldly experience, but the majority, just by design, it's not by design, it's just by happenstance that the military doesn't teach you anything about finances, and it almost won't allow any kind of financial education in there through whatever reason or mechanism. And so it's almost up to the individual to reach out and source that information and create that future opportunity for themselves. And if I put words in your mouth, RT, that's exactly why Axon was created, was to be able to provide that level of literacy, through using the property asset class as their vehicle, to be able to generate that wealth to provide people with a financial future, a secure financial future.
We see it all the time. Like, you're a special forces guy, you're a pilot, you're an engineer, you're a truck driver, like whatever it is. But we love it. We're like, but you're still humble enough to put your hand there and go, I'm about to embark on an endeavour that I don't know everything about. I need some assistance. It's a very, very powerful position to be in.
It is. And it's one of the unique parts of Axon as well that I've, as a client, I was a client beforehand, so I went through the build process twice with Axon before I put my cape on and jumped on this side of the screen.
Do you get a discount now?
No, mate, he rips me off. he holds me to account, don't you worry. It's the education component that comes with it, like right up front when we take people through. It's a really unique part of the business where education is a key foundation of what we do when we take people through, so their levels of competence and subsequent confidence are very high when they're going through the process. So which is something that I love, because at the back end of it, they haven't just got an asset, they've got something more valuable than an asset, which is education.
Yeah, very good. How old were you when your dad joined the military?
Oh, I wasn't born. No,
right.
So, no. So I would have. So he was in there.
What about when 50? He got out?
Oh, still. No. So there's a big gap there.
Right. Yeah, did he talk about his military service?
He didn't like to reflect on it. To be honest, he wasn't the type of the person that he had some mental health issues when he got out. And funnily, So my mother died recently as well. My mother died during COVID. This is a sad.
I'm sorry to hear that, mate.
And we found all these boxes in the garage, right? And we've gone through all these medical, It's amazing what you can get from your military past. I'm sure you guys have found, but
yeah, of course,
everything's bloody documented. And going through all the letters that just you could see, the moment that my brother died, the letters that we extracted from the military database, whatever you call it. He went downhill.
Yeah.
So he went downhill.
Yeah.
It's quite sad.
Yeah, there's
You can see
always
that.
a defining moment in
Yeah.
one's mental health journey whereby things just start to go downhill.
Yeah.
And if it's not arrested and if it's not fixed, the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to be.
And
imagine back then. Imagine having mental health.
Exactly.
It wasn't
Yeah.
in the 1950s and there wasn't a thing, right?
the mechanisms for support just weren't there. Like at least whilst they're still lacking in some areas today, and they're always striving to do better. I can only imagine that going through that, you'd almost feel like you were going through it alone, because it's not spoken about. Blokes were blokes, and blokes didn't speak about mental health like we do today.
Well, I'll tell you something
Even
about
less so in the 50s.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's right. I'll tell you something. One of the letters that we found was he was buried at one place first in Singapore, and then developers were going to they were going to sell the land where he was buried. And there was a letter from the military saying, okay, there's two choices. You can either pay $5,000 to have him sent home, or you move him to this other cemetery, right? And they didn't have any money. I was like, well, he's just served. You can't send him home.
Of course.
How's that? And it's like, and then we found the letter that he wrote back saying, okay, look, I haven't got the money to bring my son home. I was like, I reckon, really? You can't send him home?
Mate, did you go and offer those developers a depreciation schedule?
There's a lot of units in Singapore to depreciate.
Two more things I want to talk about. Being a business owner in the here and now, and life as a business owner. Like I sort of use the analogy, when you become a business owner, you grab your chips of life and you put them in the middle of the table and say, that's me. For instance, when I really badly busted my ankle 6 months after I started, I didn't call the boss and say, I need to go on sick leave. Can you still be paying me, etc. So, there's none of that sort of, there's no fallback, there's no support mechanisms that employees have. Like we sort of have, 20 days a year as work from home days. I don't have work from home days. I'm just on fucking every single day. So I'm interested in your insights about what it's like to be a business owner. You've been in business longer than I, so I'm looking forward to unpacking that. And the last little bit is really about brand new properties and their depreciation benefits versus second-hand properties. And I know the laws have changed over the years, but it's a really key fundamental aspect of like who we are and what we do. We know it's a no-brainer already from a reduction of risk and maximising cash flow to buy brand new, but you're the expert. And I'm looking forward to you sharing that sort of stuff with our listeners.
Sure.
Let's jump into the business stuff for now. So you had a bit of a toe in the water about running your own firm, and granted that original property depreciation PTY Ltd, I think you said, is still around. It's probably that old you won't be able to find it on the internet. But anyway,
there's no websites back then.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Thanks.
And then of course you came back in and you started working with Mr. Brown. Interestingly, you said off camera that the term Washington Brown simply came from, he thought it was a cool term to join together. There's no Mr. Washington.
No Mr. Washington.
Yeah.
It's made it better than Tony Brown and Associates.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Savvy.
One of the boys at the back then is like, oh, we can call it Axon Brown going forward. Because mate, there'd be there's nearly 400 properties right now that we've got on our books, and probably 7 or 8 of them are in the build still that haven't got the depreciation report done. So we've done a lot of business together over.
Absolutely.
Axons
I was looking it up.
so
It's good.
Yes,
Thank you.
which is a month. No, thank you, mate.
Yeah,
I know
thank you.
I know those depreciation reports are $700, and we get them for $385, and our clients get them for $385.
Yeah.
There's no margin there. So the back end wholesale space that we operate in, we just pass on straight to our clients. So that's
Well, that's good because some people don't do that.
Well, I know that's because we're fucking different, right? I don't want the $50 markup. I just want people to be looked after, mate.
I agree.
Yeah.
I can't be fucked with the me invoicing you for $50 is not worth my time. Just pass the saving on to everyone else.
So some clients, the developers say, look, just pay for it, give it to them, because they're going to be able to afford another one if you give it to them, right? For 100, like when we're doing like a Meriton apartment, right?
Yeah.
1,000, just give it to them because they're going to be able to come back and get another one off you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then you sort of came back and you joined forces with Mr. Brown, obviously. Then you've taken over. Like when you decided to buy him out and grab all your chips, Ty, and put them in the centre of the table, what was that like for you? And then how's your business evolution sort of been over the last few years?
Well, it was tricky time. It was, I guess, because I was buying his baby.
Yeah.
So that was interesting process.
Remember that too. That's probably going to happen one day.
So that was, and I didn't really have any. It was amicable. It was because there was no. We didn't have to get lawyers in or anything like that. We'd worked together for that long, so it was like I think he probably regrets it in some ways that he might have retired a little bit earlier than he thought, but in other ways he was advised to get out totally rather than just keeping a share, which he could have done, which I'm surprised he didn't do, to be honest. I bet he wishes he did. So
Just remember that,
I'm loving this.
So it was a good process, to be honest, and the business has grown bigger and better than ever. During COVID, it was interesting because, a lot of our business was related to, that was an interesting process because as I've been in this business for a long time, I decided in 2017 to pack up and go and live in Bali for 2 years, which was a good test of the business. So here I am running a medium-sized business, and I went off and said, you know what, I'm going to go and live in Bali. Took my daughter to this place called the Green School, which is this big bamboo school in the jungle.
Wow.
And so I ran a medium-sized business from a bamboo school in the jungle. If you're listening to this, Google the Green School. It's the most amazing architectural buildings. There's no aircon, there's drop toilets, there's no walls, and kids wear thongs, and there's no homework.
Mate, I just lived in
East Timor.
I just lived in East Timor for 5 years, mate. So I'm getting flashbacks.
And so then we're living there, running it. No one knew that I was there. The only time I had to come back,
Find that hard to believe.
No, I didn't tell clients.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I didn't tell clients. I didn't say, "Hey, I'm here." We were COVID ready because I'd already set up the business to work remotely, right?
Yep.
And so everyone was already doing it a bit. The only time I had to come back, it's a true story, was Harry Triggerboff said, "I've got to come for a meeting," right? And Harry Triggerboff's he owns Meriton Apartment, and he's not a Zoom kind of guy. He's never had a computer.
He's about 140 years old, mate.
He's 91. I go to his birthday, and so I had to come back. Here I am going to because the Green School is an environmentally school. So here I am at the most environmentally friendly school in the world, flying back for lunch. Kind of ironic, but you've got to do what you got to do.
Greenhouse gases.
Yeah, plant a couple of trees when you get back, mate. We're good. We're square.
Private jets don't emit gases. It's all right.
So we were COVID ready, and then COVID came. We had to come back because you're getting texts from the government saying. But it set us up well for COVID. It set us up well, and also, but what COVID did struggle with, we have a business that revolves around going to people's houses. No one wanted to let remember with COVID, no one wanted to let someone come in, open doors, touch things, right?
Yeah.
No.
So we kind of changed our model a bit. And because the laws have changed, this is a good segue into it, because the laws have changed and you can only claim depreciation of the plant and equipment on brand new items, that means that you can only claim the structure of it secondhand.
Yep.
Because we've worked with all these developers all these years, we've already got a lot of the existing costs on buildings. I have the existing costs on every Meriton apartment ever built.
Yeah,
right. Let alone,
yeah.
that's just one client, right? So the need for an inspection, because you can't claim the secondhand oven on a secondhand. Sorry, you can't claim a secondhand oven anymore. You can only claim the structure of the building. Well, we've got the structural costs.
Yeah.
So we kind of say, well, we look at each property now and say, well, this one needs an inspection, this one doesn't. This one does, this one doesn't. So we don't do it on an annual.
For brand new properties, you don't. Our team just sends the build contract, and then you guys are able to dissect that from
That's
there.
right,
So it's effectively a desktop.
It is a desktop because it's actually the most accurate way because you've got the plans. So we go out and we measure physically, right? We're better off measuring on a set of plans than we are going with a little digital thing, right? It's more accurate to measure from a set of plans.
The engineering plans,
right? And you've got so you give us the specification, so we know exactly what's in there. We know what's the build cost. We know and the areas, because we get the areas of carpet, for instance, from the plans. So in your case, it's the most accurate way that we can do it.
Yep. Is that so? Was that kind of like, with the change, the pressures of COVID forcing you to change that business process, has that simplified things going forward for you? So it's kind of like, it was a bit of arse pain at the start, but now it's like, that's one of the best things that's ever happened to us.
Absolutely. I was thinking of doing this before COVID, and then COVID just made it go, well, let's just do it because of the law change. So just to educate your listeners, So there was major law changes in our space in 2017 where the government said you can no longer claim depreciation of plant and equipment items, that's the ovens, dishwashers, etc., if the property's not brand new or you don't buy it brand new. So the moment that you buy a property that's 1 day old, so if I sell you or you sell me a brand new property, right? I would be able to get Wash and Brown will give you a report that says you can claim $15,000 in the first year.
Yep.
If I then sell it to you after 1 day, your claim's going to go down to $6,000, even though it's the same property but it's 1 day old. That's the dramatic difference between brand new now and second hand.
Yeah, they're stopping the investors effectively double dipping and passing on all the. So how I like to describe plant and equipment is if you pick the house up, King Kong, and turned it on its head and shook it, all the things that fell out, that's plant and equipment.
I like that. I've never thought of that, but hopefully your builds actually have a bit of glue under the carpet.
The relevance that for the audience and for everybody listening is the direct impact of that is cash flow.
Absolutely.
And so if you're in a position whereby the rent and the tax are your holding strategy, so you can hold this property while it goes up over time. If you've got less ability to be able to depreciate, the fixtures and fittings of the property, you're dipping into your pocket more, and the tax man's saying thank you.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in reality, if you buy, because it's unusual, you're going to buy a house which is less than a year old. So secondhand for me is like something which is at least a year old.
Yeah.
So someone's bought it, they've lived in it for a year, whatever else, and they've got their first homeowners grant, whatever it's going to be, maybe even the HPAS. They're like, right, well, we're getting posted, we're going to sell it to someone else. So someone buys a brand new property which is only 1 year old. Remember, you got to pay full stamp duty. So on a $650,000 property here in Southeast Queensland, that's $25,000 stamp duty you've got to pay. As opposed to a land and build, say it's $300,000 for the land, the house doesn't exist yet, so that's only $8,500 stamp duty you've got to pay. So it's $14,000 worth of stamp duty. And because the house is 1 year old, doesn't come with a builder's warranty anymore. Sure, it comes with a 6.5 year government-backed structural guarantee, no dramas, but you're effectively undertaking a bit of risk. And you can't claim all the plant and equipment. Yeah. So it's almost like a triple whammy from a concept point of view about why is it that our business model resonates and works so well, because it's got risk and cash flow attached to it. Like, do you agree with all that stuff?
I totally agree with that. The other thing also is that the rents don't... Just because, like I say, you're getting less depreciation, but if it's 1 year old, you're going to get the same rent.
Yeah,
it's not
exactly.
like that's dramatically different. No, 1 year old is...
might be $20 or $30 different. Like if you're buying a high demand area, like we have seen some incremental rental increases for sure.
Right.
Don't get me wrong, our clients are not like those people on the news right now that are asking for $200 a week in 1 year.
Yeah.
That's a bit fucking rich, mind you. But certainly, if the market's gone up, like there has been areas where it was $581 year and now it's $650 the next year. And that's just the market conditions. So you do get a little bit extra rent there. But as you heard me say next door, at the end of the day, between the rent return and the tax return, there's simply holding strategies. What's the number one thing we're trying to achieve with property investment?
It's capital growth.
Capital growth
over time.
Who gives a fuck about an extra $100 a week in your tax or your rent? That's $5,000 a year.
Yeah.
If you bought an area that's not going up in value, it's a waste of time.
It's irrelevant.
Even if your property's negatively geared and negative cash flow after your tax return, if you've made $50,000 in capital gain, are you further in front? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Of course you are.
And this is a very interesting point in the cycle, if you ask me. You've got a lot of immigration. People are struggling to get built. Developers are struggling to get properties built because they can't get the finances going through. People can't get finance, so you're going to have less stock, massive immigration.
Isn't there 650,000 people in the next 12 months that are moving here?
2 million over the next couple of years.
Where the fuck are they all going to live? Well, somewhere is the answer.
Developers get digging. And that was compounded in Southeast Queensland, as you know. Domestic migration in Southeast Queensland has been substantial because people went, fuck, this is the best place in Australia to live. I want to move here, and that was compounded over sort of a 12 to 18 month period when we had the weather conditions that sort of stopped development being able to continue. The insurance requirement, the insurance jobs that were out there put pressure and stress on the trades that were going, and the migration's not stopping for Southeast Queensland. So that question still stands: is where the fuck is everybody going to live?
How many years you been in business now?
Wash and Brown, 42.
Now, how many years you been in business? You're not like 80 years old. You're 52. you didn't start when you were 10.
So
don't even start us on grey hair, mate.
So in Wash and Brown, I was 27, 28 years.
Wow.
That's young, man.
That is, 5 times almost the amount of time I've been in business.
Yeah.
What do you love most about being in business? Because I've still got a passion, which is hopefully on display most days.
Yep.
I love coaching clients literally, and I worked with Damo for 4 years. Now I've been doing this for 6 years, so I've got 10 years of coaching clients under my belt. And I did another one last night, and I fucking loved it, every single second of it, the same as what I did when I first started. What lights your fire in business still after all this time?
The challenge. I getting up and saying, what can we do today? The staff. I love my staff. The average length of tenure at Washington Brown is 12 years.
Oh, that's
Can't
amazing.
get rid of them.
Remember that, Luke.
Can't get rid of them.
I'm dug in like an Alabama tick, mate. I'm not going anywhere.
You remember that, Daniel, as well.
We have fun. Washington Brown, we have fun, all that stuff. There's been a lot of weeding out to get to this core group of people,
Yeah.
right?
It always happens.
They're family, right?
Yes.
The people with me now are they are literally family. Like, I tell my staff, I love you, you know.
Yeah.
It's a bit weird, I know, but...
I've normally fucking 15 beers drink when I say 15 beers down,
But it's great. As I said, my father lost everything, so it wasn't. And I've done pretty well. To the point where I'm starting a podcast called 10 with Ty. So I've done pretty well. I want to leave something for my daughter so she doesn't lose more money. So I'm going to ask some of the smartest people I know 10 questions, right?
Yep.
The 10 questions are things like, if you could go back and find your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them about investing?
Yep.
What's been your best investment? Or so questions like that are timeless that I want to hopefully package up a book and leave it for my daughter.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's a legacy. Like,
Well, that's because my father lost all his money, so I wanted to just leave her something yeah.
Well, some of those hardest lessons, like we were discussing this before, some of those hardest lessons that you learned, they're the ones that, the ones that hurt the most are the ones that leave the most profound impact on you going forward, right? And so...
Well, so my first two questions are, what is your best investment? But the second question is, what has been your worst investment?
Yeah.
Because I've learned more from my worst investments than I have from my best investments.
Yep,
of course.
Right?
Of course.
One of the really key parts of the coaching session that are coming out a lot at the moment, like there's a lot of young, smart people in the defence force that have been they've been brought up well. Like, they've got people our age, they're in their, so 50-year-old parents, 21, 22-year-old kids, whatever it is, and they come and they're like, we've got $100 grand in their bank because I've been saving since I started working at Macca's when I was 15. We're like, fucking bravo.
It's super inspirational.
Sure as shit, that wasn't us.
Yeah,
right?
So I was just making memories.
Yeah. But similarly, some of the 50-year-olds that come to us that haven't started their property investing now, they're like, holy shit, if we don't do something now, we're not going to break the cycle. Because you told your story about your parents. I know what you grew up in a country town in New South Wales, and I know that your parents perhaps didn't do as well as they could have with their money either.
Sure.
And my parents, God bless them, and I know Mum will listen to this. They if they had the right mindset and coaching and just will to be able to invest as opposed to just live, they would have a different financial circumstance right now as well. So just breaking that cycle, as I call it, I think is a really big thing at the moment. And I guess that's how I would encapsulate what you spoke about before.
That's why I actually wanted to come here today, to be honest. Because I know you've got a lot of defence skills. I want to tell you the story about with my father with his financial literacy and not starting this path early. So hopefully might change someone's...
It's going to you saw the look on my face, mate. Like, that will resonate so strongly with so many of our listeners. I know that is going to land, and if they're not already sitting there thinking, "Fuck, I've got to do something with my money," I've got to invest because money's not going to come through the door. It's for eternity if I don't bloody sort my life out. And me in particular, I find that guys, there's a window between 28 and 32 where they hit this point and they go, "Fuck, what am I doing?" They're just starting to creep in to have responsibilities in life. They're just starting to see the fact that they're going to have kids, a wife, a family unit for them to be a part of and support. And so I find it's around that 28 to 32. But we've also had some really young clients coming in, and it's just so inspirational to see them just be so careful, so cautious about making sure that they're putting themselves on a path that's going to give them their financial freedom down the track. Where if they don't want to, they don't have to put on a shirt and go to work for somebody else if they don't want to. It's awesome.
We'd have 50 clients that would have 2 or 3 properties under their belt before they're 30.
Wow, really?
Yep.
And when you're talking about time, and when you're talking about putting the structures in place to still have them when they get to our age and beyond to leave a legacy for their kids. Fuck, mate, it's pretty amazing to see, isn't it?
It is really good.
All right, let's wrap it up. Ladies and gents, if you see on my socials later today that I'm sitting at Moo Moo's having a fucking steak and a glass of red with this bloke, you know what's just happened beforehand. Tyron Hyde, thank you so much for coming and joining Axons Unleashed. Love having you here, mate.
Mate,
Thanks,
more
buddy.
energy than a nuclear power plant, mate. Thank you.
See you later, everyone. Have a great day. See ya.
Bye.